I spent 20 years building the safest highways in the state, only for a nepotism hire executive to fire me on the side of the road because I refused to cut safety corners. He wanted me gone immediately, so I maliciously complied. I packed up all my gear, including the essential road closed signs protecting the wet cement, and drove away, leaving his project defenseless against the morning rush hour. Tell me where you're watching from today, and what's the temperature? I'm betting it's cooler there than the heat coming off a fresh batch of asphalt, and definitely cooler than the anger boiling in my blood during this story. The smell of wet concrete at 2 in the morning is distinctive. It's a heavy, chalky scent that hangs low in the humid air, mixing with the diesel fumes of the idling mixers and the metallic tang of hot engines. To most people, it smells like construction and traffic delays. To me, Jack Sarge Miller, it smelled like my life's work. I checked my watch. 2:14 a.m. Ease it back, Tony. Gentle, I shouted over the roar of the screed. Tony, my rookie on the crew, was guiding the chute of the mixer truck with a look of intense concentration on his face. He was a good kid, barely 22, trying to feed a young family. He treated the concrete like it was liquid gold, which, considering the cost of this particular polymer-modified overlay, it basically was. "Looking good, Sarge," Tony yelled back, giving me a thumbs up. We were working on the I-95 interchange, the main artery into the city. The state had given us a strict window, 10:00 p.m. to 5:00 a.m. By the time the morning commuters started sipping their first coffees, this concrete needed to be hard enough to take the weight of a semi-truck. It was a precision operation. Everything had to be perfect. The slump, the temperature, the finish. I wiped sweat from my forehead with the back of my glove. Even in the dead of night, the heat radiating from the chemical reaction in the curing concrete was intense. I walked the line, my boots crunching on the gravel shoulder. Inspecting the forms, my crew was a well-oiled machine. They knew I didn't tolerate shortcuts. In this business, a shortcut meant a pothole in 6 months, and a pothole meant a blown tire, a swerve, and a family in a minivan hitting the guardrail. Not on my watch. "Sarah, how are we looking on the next load?" I keyed my radio, speaking to our site dispatcher. "Truck 4 is 10 minutes out, Jack," Sarah's voice crackled back, calm and steady. "But heads up, you got a visitor." Black SUV just pulled through the checkpoint. My stomach tightened. There was only one person who drove a pristine black SUV onto a muddy job site in the middle of the night. Gavin Morris. Gavin was the new vice president of operations. He was 30 years old, had a degree in business management, and happened to be the nephew of the owner, Mr. Phillips. Gavin had never held a shovel in his life. He thought concrete dried because you asked it nicely. He wore Italian loafers to site visits and looked at the crew like we were part of the machinery, replaceable, dirty, and too expensive. I watched the headlights sweep across the fresh gray slab we had just laid. The SUV came to a halt dangerously close to the edge of the forms. The door opened and Gavin stepped out. He was wearing a suit jacket over a t-shirt, some kind of trendy look that made him look ridiculous next to men in high vests and hard hats. "Miller," he barked, not bothering with a greeting. He walked over, stepping delicately to avoid a puddle of slurry. "Why is the second lane still closed? The schedule says we should be pouring lane 3 by now." I took a deep breath, centering myself. "We had a delay with the batch plant, Gavin. Bad mix." I sent it back. "We're 40 minutes behind, but we'll make it up on the finish." "You sent a truck back," Gavin's eyes bulged. "Do you have any idea what that costs?" "That's $5,000 down the drain." "It was too wet, Gavin," I explained, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. "If we poured it, it wouldn't hit the PSI rating. It would crack within a month." "I don't care about a month from now. I care about the quarterly budget reports due on Tuesday." He waved a hand dismissively at the work we were doing. "You're bleeding money, Miller. My uncle put me in charge to stop the bleeding. Speed it up. Pour the next batch, regardless of the slump test. I want this lane open by 4:30. The crew had stopped working. The sudden silence of the screed made Gavin's voice carry. Tony was watching, his shovel hovering in midair. "I can't do that," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "We need a minimum of 4 hours cure time before traffic hits this. If we open at 4:30, it'll be soup. You'll have tire tracks permanently set in the highway." Gavin stepped closer, invading my personal space. He smelled of expensive cologne and arrogance. "I didn't ask for a geology lesson, Sarge. I gave you an order. Optimize the workflow. Cut the cure time. Get it open. I looked at the wet concrete, then back at him. No. The word hung in the air, heavier than the humidity. In the construction world, you don't tell the VP no unless you're ready for a war. But I had been building roads since Gavin was in diapers. I knew the physics of the job, better than he knew his own stock portfolio. "Excuse me," Gavin laughed, a short, sharp sound devoid of humor. "Did you just say no to me?" I said no, I repeated, standing my ground. I'm a big guy, broad-shouldered from decades of lifting rebar and tamping asphalt. I towered over him, but Gavin had the confidence of a man who had never been punched in the mouth. "This is a safety issue, Gavin. If we open early, the concrete fails. If the concrete fails, cars lose traction. People get hurt. I am the superintendent on this ticket. My signature goes on the inspection. I'm not signing off on a death trap." Gavin's face turned a blotchy shade of red. He looked around at the crew. Tony, Elias, no, Elias wasn't here. He was long gone from the trade, but the other guys, Mike and Sal, were watching. Gavin realized he was losing face in front of the laborers. "You think you're untouchable because you've been here 20 years, Gavin hissed. "You're a dinosaur, Miller. You're inefficient. You waste materials. And you're insubordinate." "I'm thorough," I corrected him. "Mr. Phillips knows how I work." "Mr. Phillips is in the Hamptons," Gavin snapped. "I'm running operations now, and I'm telling you to open the lane at 4:30. Are you going to do it? Or do I need to find someone who understands the modern economy?" I looked at the fresh pour. It was perfect. Smooth, leveled, waiting to set. Destroying it by rushing the process would be a sin against the trade. "I won't do it," I said quietly, "and I won't let any of my men do it either. We wait until 6:00 a.m. or we don't open." Gavin stared at me for a long 5 seconds. I saw the calculation in his eyes. He didn't care about the road. He cared about dominance. He cared about showing the company that he was the alpha dog who could trim the fat. "Give me your radio," he said. "What?" "Give me your radio, and your badge, and your keys to the foreman's truck." He held out his hand, palm up. "You're fired, Jack, effective immediately. Get off my site." The shock hit me like a physical blow. "Fired? For doing the job right? You can't be serious." "You can't fire me in the middle of a pour." I just did. Insubordination, gross incompetence. I'll have legal draw up the papers in the morning. Now hand over the gear before I call the cops and have you trespassed. I looked at Tony. The kid looked terrified. He started to step forward, maybe to defend me, but I held up a hand to stop him. If Tony spoke up, Gavin would fire him too, and Tony had a baby on the way. He couldn't afford this fight. Slowly, deliberately, I unclipped the radio from my vest. I placed it in Gavin's soft, manicured hand. Then I took the master keys out of my pocket. "This is a mistake, Gavin," I said, my voice shaking with suppressed rage. "You don't know what you're doing." "I'm saving this company money," he sneered, closing his fist around the keys. "Now get out. I don't want to see your face on this highway. Take your personal crap and go." "My personal crap?" and I asked. "Anything that belongs to you. If it's not company property, take it. I don't want you coming back tomorrow claiming we stole your lunchbox. Clear out. Now." He turned his back on me, walking toward Tony to start barking orders. "You kid! Get that screen moving faster. We're opening at 4:30. I stood there for a moment, the sounds of the highway rushing in my ears. The injustice of it burned. I had given this company everything. My back, my knees, my weekends. And this little MBA punk was tossing me aside like garbage. "Anything that belongs to me," I muttered to myself. I looked toward my personal pickup truck parked on the shoulder. Then my eyes drifted to the safety perimeter. Technically, the company provided the trucks and the heavy machinery, but because of a budget mix-up 3 years ago, the safety contracting had been outsourced to a subsidiary LLC that I owned. It was a tax loophole Mr. Phillips had set up. I bought the signs, the cones, and the flashers, and the company rented them from me on a monthly basis. I looked at the massive, flashing, roads closed, do not enter signs blocking the highway entrance ramp. I looked at the 300 traffic cones specifically tapering the high-speed traffic away from our wet concrete. The contract for those rentals had expired yesterday. I had the renewal paperwork on my desk waiting to be signed on Monday. Technically, right now, every single one of those signs belonged to me. And Gavin had just ordered me to remove my personal property immediately. Walking away from a job site you're supposed to be running is a surreal experience. The noise of the jackhammers and the reverse beepers usually sounds like music, to me the rhythm of progress. Now it just sounded like chaos waiting to happen. I walked to my personal truck, a battered Ford F-250 that had seen more construction sites than a safety inspector. I opened the door and threw my hard hat onto the passenger seat. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of pure, unadulterated anger. I could see Gavin in the rearview mirror, pointing aggressively at the wet concrete, yelling at Tony. Tony looked miserable. I felt a pang of guilt leaving him there, but I had to play this hand. Gavin needed to learn a lesson that no business school could teach. I started the engine. The diesel rumble was comforting. I pulled out my phone and called Sarah at dispatch. "Jack, what's going on? Gavin is screaming on the main channel," Sarah whispered. "I'm out, Sarah. He fired me." "He what? Is he rung?" "He what? Is he drunk?" "He might as well be." "Listen, Sarah, log this call. Timestamp it. 2:25 a.m. I am leaving the site per the direct orders of the Vice President of Operations. He instructed me to remove all personal property immediately. "Jack, don't do anything crazy," Sarah warned, though I could hear the hesitation in her voice. She hated Gavin too. Last week he had tried to cut her overtime pay. "I'm just following orders, Sarah. He was very specific. He said, if it's not company property, take it. You know the rental agreement on the safety gear expired on the 22nd, right?" There was a long silence on the other end. Then I heard a small dark chuckle. "I believe the paperwork is sitting in your inbox, unsigned," Sarah said. "Technically, the company is currently in unauthorized possession of your equipment." "Exactly. I wouldn't want to be liable for leaving my property on a company site after being terminated. That's a liability issue." "You're a bad man, Jack Miller," she said, but the tone was full of approval. "I didn't see anything. I'm just logging that you checked out." "Thanks, Sarah. Tell Tony I'm sorry." I hung up and put the truck in gear. I didn't drive away, though. I threw it into reverse. I backed up toward the start of the work zone, right where the traffic was being diverted from 3 lanes down to 2. The massive LED arrow board was flashing, pushing cars to the left. The roads to closed signs were standing guard like sentinels. I hopped out of the truck. The wind from the passing semi-trucks in the open lanes whipped my hair. It was dangerous work, picking up signs on a live highway, but I'd done it 1,000 times. I grabbed the first left lane closed ahead sign. It was heavy, weighted down with sandbags. I tossed the sandbags into the bed of my truck, then collapsed the stand and threw the sign in. Clang. Next, the construction ahead sign. Clang. Then the big one, the not enter barricade positioned right at the mouth of the fresh pour. I looked down the lane. About 500 yards away, I could see the silhouette of Gavin standing over the concrete. He was too busy berating the crew to look back at the entrance of the work zone. He assumed the safety perimeter was part of the universe, a constant that just existed. He didn't realize that safety wasn't magic. It was equipment that belonged to me. I grabbed the barricade. It was bulky. I heaved it into the truck bed. Finally, the cones. I didn't take all of them, that would take too long, and I didn't want to cause a wreck immediately. I just took the taper, the first 50 cones that guided the cars away from the lane. Without them, the visual cue to merge left was gone. The lane now looked wide open. To a tired driver doing 70 miles per hour, the dark, smooth, fresh concrete would just look like a newly paved express lane. I slammed the tailgate shut. My truck was full of reflective orange and white metal. I got back in the driver's seat. I took one last look at the setup. The entrance to the work zone was now completely naked. No signs, no warnings. Just a seamless transition from the old asphalt onto the wet, uncured, multi-million-dollar polymer concrete. "Good luck, Gavin," I whispered. I punched the gas and merged into traffic, disappearing into the stream of taillights, leaving the site wide open to the world. I pulled into my driveway at 3:15 a.m. The house was dark, the lawn still wet with dew. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles had turned white. The adrenaline that had fueled my spiteful exit was starting to fade, replaced by a cold, hard knot of anxiety in my stomach. I killed the engine, but I didn't get out immediately. I sat there in the silence of the suburbs, listening to the tick-tick of the cooling engine. In the rearview mirror, the bed of my truck glowed faintly orange under the streetlight. It was piled high with the roads closed barricades, the left lane Eanes diamond signs, and a stack of reflective cones. "You really did it, Jack," I whispered to myself. You really just left an active construction zone completely unprotected. It wasn't just petty, it was nuclear. The front porch light flicked on. Lisa, she must have heard the truck. I sighed, opening the door and stepping out. My boots felt heavy. Lisa opened the front door, tightening her robe around herself. She squinted at the truck, then at me. Her eyes went wide when she saw the cargo in the bed. She knew the business better than anyone. She did my books for the LLC. She knew those signs were supposed to be guarding the I-95 interchange right now. "Jack?" she asked, her voice sharp with worry. "Why is the safety gear in the truck? Did the job get canceled?" I walked up the steps and kissed her on the forehead. She smelled like lavender detergents and sleep. "Not canceled. I got fired." "Fired?" She pulled back, looking at my face. "It's 3:00 a.m. Who fires someone at 3:00 a.m.? "Gavin Morris," I said, the name tasting like bile. "He wanted me to open the lane early. Unsafe early." I refused. He took my badge, my keys, and told me to remove all my personal property immediately. I gestured to the truck. So I did. Lisa looked at the truck, then back at me. The realization hit her slowly. She looked at her watch. "Jack, rush hour starts in 2 hours. If those signs are here, then they aren't there," I finished for her. "Oh my God," she breathed. She wasn't angry. She was horrified, but I could see a spark of something else in her eyes. Lisa was a nurse. She dealt with life and death, but she also dealt with hospital bureaucracy. She knew what it was like to be pushed around by suits who didn't know the job. "Is it legal?" "The rental contract expired yesterday," I said, walking into the kitchen and heading straight for the coffee pot. I needed caffeine. Technically, if I had left them there after being terminated, I could be sued for abandoning property or unauthorized use of equipment. I was just following the VP's direct orders to clear the site. Lisa leaned against the counter, watching me scoop coffee grounds. "Jack, you know what's going to happen? People are going to drive right into that wet pour." "I know. It's going to destroy the cars. It's going to destroy the concrete. I know. Gavin is going to try to kill you." "Let him try," I said, turning on the machine. The gurgle of the water heating up filled the silence. He wanted to save money. He just bought himself the most expensive morning of his life. "But Lisa, I need you to find that contract. The one with the rental dates. I need to have it ready when the lawyers call." She nodded, already moving toward the home office. "I scanned it last week. It's on the cloud." "Jack?" "Yeah?" "Did you take the taper cones?" "The ones that guide the traffic? Every single one." She paused at the doorway, a small, terrifying smile playing on her lips. "Good." I didn't sleep. I sat in my recliner in the living room, staring at the local news channel with the volume low. Lisa sat next to me with her laptop, reviewing the PDF of the rental agreement like a general reviewing battle plans. At 5:00 a.m., the news anchor, a cheerful woman named Brenda, was talking about a charity bake sale. At 5:15 a.m., the traffic report came on. The map of the city was mostly green. "Smooth sailing on I-95 this morning," the traffic reporter said. "Construction crews are wrapping up near the interchange, so expect some residual slowing, but all lanes should be open soon." "Not all lanes," I muttered, taking a sip of coffee. At 5:42 a.m., the tone changed. "We're getting breaking news of a developing situation on I-95 South," Brenda said, pressing her earpiece. Her cheerful demeanor had vanished. "Reports are coming in of a massive pileup. No, not a crash. A stuck event." We're going live to the traffic cam. The screen cut to a grainy, high-angle shot from a dot traffic camera mounted on a pole near the interchange. My jaw tightened. It was a disaster. Without the taper cones guiding them to the left, the early morning commuters had done exactly what drivers always do. They took the path of least resistance. The first car, a white sedan, had drifted into the closed lane, thinking it was a freshly opened express route. You could see the result clearly. The car had made it about 50 feet into the wet polymer concrete before physics took over. The concrete, still in its gelatinous curing phase, had grabbed the tires like quicksand. The car had bogged down, sinking up to its rocker panels. But it wasn't just one car. Because there were no brake lights or warning signs, the car behind him had followed, and the one behind that. There were 6 cars trapped in the slab. It looked like bugs caught in gray amber. The lane behind them was a parking lot. Drivers were swerving at the last second, realizing the lane was a trap. Horns were presumably blaring, though the TV was silent. I saw tiny figures, construction workers running frantically along the shoulder. I recognized the neon yellow vest of Tony. He was waving his arms, trying to stop more cars from entering the trap. "Look at the lead car," Lisa pointed at the screen. "That's a Mercedes. That concrete is a polymer blend," I said, my voice flat. "It cures fast, and it bonds to everything. It's already hardening around their wheels, their suspension, their brake lines. Those cars are totaled. You can't chip that stuff off. You'd have to replace the entire undercarriage." "And the road?" Lisa asked. "Ruined," I said. "You can't patch that. The structural integrity is gone. They'll have to jackhammer the whole section out cars and all and re-pour. That's 100 yards of custom mix. That's easily $200,000 in materials alone, plus the labor, plus the lawsuits from the drivers." The camera zoomed in. I saw a figure in a suit, Gavin, sprinting from the side of the road toward the trapped cars. He was waving his arms, screaming at the drivers as if yelling would make the concrete release them. He slipped on the shoulder, his expensive loafers losing traction in the mud, and went down on one knee. "He looks panicked," Lisa observed. "He should be," I said. "He just realized why we used the road closed signs." My phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was Tony. I picked it up. "Morning, Tony." "Sarge." "Oh my God, Sarge." Toot, 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 toot. An odious Sarge. Tony sounded like he was hyperventilating. "It's a war zone. There are cars everywhere. A lady in a minivan is crying. Gavin is throwing up on the side of the road. Where are the signs? Where did the signs go?" "I took them home, Tony," I said calmly. "Gavin fired me and told me to take my property." There was a stunned silence on the line. You took the taper?" "I took what was mine. Sarge, the police are here. State troopers, they're asking for the site supervisor." Gavin is pointing at his phone, screaming your name. "Tell the troopers I'm at home," I said, "and Tony, don't say anything else. Just do your job and stay out of the wet stuff." I hung up. Lisa looked at me. "The police." "Expected," I said. "But this isn't a criminal matter. It's a civil contract dispute. Gavin had a duty of care to maintain a safe work site. He fired the safety officer and ordered the removal of safety equipment. That's on him. You better call Elias," Lisa said. "Yeah," I nodded. "It's time to call the fixer." By 8:00 a.m., I was the most hated man on morning radio, and I hadn't even left my house. The news choppers were circling the site now. The footage was high definition. The sheer scale of the mess was breathtaking. It wasn't just 6 cars anymore. The ripple effect had caused a gridlock that stretched back 10 miles. The entire city was paralyzed because the main artery was shut down. The visuals were striking. The concrete had begun to set. The drivers had been evacuated from their vehicles, standing on the shoulder, watching as their cars became permanent fixtures of the highway. A tow truck had arrived and tried to pull the last car out of Ford F-150, but the cable snapped. The truck was cemented in. I was finishing my 3rd cup of coffee when the doorbell rang. It wasn't a polite ring. It was a pounding. I checked the peephole. 2 state troopers, and behind them, looking sweaty, disheveled, and covered in gray splatter, was Gavin. I opened the door. "That's him. That's the maniac," Gavin screamed, pointing a finger at me. His suit was ruined. He had dry concrete on his cheek. "Arrest him. He sabotaged the site. He stole company property. He caused a riot." The older trooper, a guy with a mustache that looked like it had seen everything, stepped forward. "Mr. Mystery, Jack Miller." "That's me, officer," I said politely. "Can I help you?" "We're investigating a major public safety incident on I-95, the trooper said. "Mr. Morris here claims you stole safety signage from the site, directly causing multiple vehicle collisions." "Stole?" I looked at Gavin. "I didn't steal anything. I retrieved my property." "Liar!" Gavin shrieked. "Those signs belong to the site." "Actually," I said, stepping back and grabbing the folder Lisa had prepared from the hall table, "they belong to Miller Safety Solutions, LLC. Here is the rental agreement." I handed the paper to the trooper. "As you can see, the rental period ended at midnight on the 22nd. At 2:15 a.m. today, Mr. Morris terminated my employment as superintendent and ordered me verbally, in front of witnesses, to remove all personal property immediately. He was very specific. He said if it wasn't company property, he wanted it gone." The trooper took the contract and scanned it. He looked at the dates. He looked at the clause I had highlighted. "Owner retains right to immediate repossession upon expiration of lease." "Is this your signature, Mr. Morris?" the trooper asked, holding up the document. Gavin stared at the paper. I I sign 100 things a week. That doesn't matter. He knew. He knew what would happen. I warned him, I interjected. I told him the concrete wasn't cured. I told him we couldn't open the lane. He fired me for insubordination and kicked me off the site. I couldn't very well leave my expensive equipment unguarded on the site I was no longer authorized to be on, could I? That would be trespassing. The trooper looked at Gavin. The dynamic shifted instantly. The trooper wasn't looking at a victim of theft anymore. He was looking at a manager who had grossly mismanaged the site. "Mr. Morris," the trooper said, his voice dropping, "did you verify that you had replacement safety measures in place before you dismissed your safety contractor?" I thought," Gavin stammered. "I didn't know the signs were his. I thought the company owned them. Ignorance of your own contracts isn't a defense for criminal negligence," the trooper said. "You have 6 civilians who lost their vehicles today. We're lucky nobody was killed." "Sir, I'm going to need you to come with us to the station to give a statement." "Me?" Gavin squeaked. "What about him? He took the signs. He took his property," the trooper said. "You failed to secure the highway." As they led Gavin away toward the cruiser, he looked back at me with eyes full of pure hatred. I just stood on my porch, sipping my coffee. But as the police cruiser pulled away, I noticed something on the TV screen inside. The news chopper was zooming in on the deep ruts the cars had made in the concrete. The tires had churned up the mix, exposing the rebar grid underneath. I frowned and walked back inside, leaning close to the TV. "Lisa," I said, my voice low, "pause that. Rewind." She hit the button. "What is it?" "Zoom in on the tire of the white Mercedes. Look at the hole it dug." She zoomed in on the tire of the white Mercedes. "Look at the hole it dug." She zoomed in. The jagged edges of the concrete were visible, but something was missing. "Where is the rebar?" I whispered. "What?" "The steel reinforcement. The mesh. It should be visible where the concrete broke. There should be steel bars every 6 inches. I stared at the screen. The concrete was just gray mush. There was no steel. My blood ran cold. It wasn't just a rush job. It wasn't just an approach job. It wasn't just incompetence. "Gavin didn't just cut the cure time," I said, the realization hitting me like a sledgehammer. "He didn't put the steel in. He poured straight concrete over the subbase." "Is that bad?" Lisa asked. "Bad?" I looked at her. "Lisa, that's an interstate overpass. Without the steel, that concrete has no tensile strength. If heavy trucks had driven on that, the whole bridge would have collapsed. He was building a trapdoor." I grabbed my phone. My hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't anger, it was fear. "I need to call Elias," I said. "This isn't a dispute anymore. It's a crime scene." I stared at the paused image on the TV screen, the grainy, pixelated void where the rebar should have been. My heart hammered against my ribs. In construction, cutting corners meant saving time or using cheaper materials. But skipping the rebar entirely? That wasn't cutting a corner. That was criminal negligence. That was attempted murder on an industrial scale. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name Elias Cruz. Elias and I went back 20 years. We'd served in the same platoon overseas, building supply routes in places where the roads were more likely to explode than hold up a truck. He was the kind of guy who noticed the small things, a disturbed patch of dirt, a loose wire. After the service, he'd taken that obsession with detail into the public sector. He was now the chief inspector for the State Ethics and Safety Board. He picked up on the second ring. "Jack?" His voice was gravelly, professional. "I'm watching the news. I assume you're the reason I'm looking at a parking lot on I-95? "I took my signs, Elias," I said, skipping the pleasantries. "Morris fired me, ordered me to clear my gear. I complied." Elias chuckled, a dry sound. "Malicious compliance. Classic. You know the state is going to have a field day with the liability, right? They're already drafting subpoenas. Forget the signs, Elias. Listen to me." I lowered my voice, even though I was in my own living room. "Are you looking at the feed, Channel 4? "Yeah. Why?" "Look at the white Mercedes. The front left tire, it dug a 2-foot rut into the slab before it hardened." There was a pause. I could hear Elias typing on a keyboard, probably pulling up a higher resolution feed on his end. "Okay, I see it. Ugly mess." "What don't you see, Elias?" Silence. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. Then a sharp intake of breath. "There's no steel," Elias whispered. "The rebar cage, it's not exposed." Exactly, that's a structural overpass deck, Elias. The specs call for number 6 bar, 12 inches on center, top and bottom matte. If that car sank 2 feet and didn't hit metal, then there is no metal, Elias finished. Holy hell, Jack. If that concrete had cured and traffic had hit it, the vibrations alone would have cracked it in a week. A heavy load? A convoy? The bridge comes down, I said. Gavin didn't just rush the cure. He stole the steel budget. That's why he was so desperate to get me off the site. He knew I'd checked the pre-pour inspection. He needed me gone before I saw the forms. This changes everything, Elias said, his voice hardening into official mode. This isn't a civil dispute about traffic cones anymore. This is fraud, grand larceny, public endangerment. Jack, do you have documentation? I have the original blueprints, I said, and I have the delivery manifest for the rebar. Wait. I paused. I don't have the manifests. I usually sign for them, but last week, Gavin said he'd handle the procurement personally to streamline the vendor process. Of course he did, Elias said. He's pocketing the cash. He's billing the state for steel he'd never bought. What do? We don't do anything, Elias said. You stay put. You let the cops investigate the traffic jam. I'm going to make a phone call to the governor's office. I'm going to authorize an emergency audit. I need to get onto that site before they rip that concrete out. They're going to demo it, Elias, I warned. Gavin will try to destroy the evidence. He'll say the concrete is ruined that needs to be hauled away immediately. Then we need to stop him, Elias said. Meet me at the site in 1 hour. Bring your hard hat. You're not the superintendent anymore, but you're my expert witness. The drive back to the site was tense. The highway was still a parking lot, so I had to take back roads, weaving through neighborhoods to get to the service access road. When I arrived, the scene was chaotic. Police cruisers, news vans, and tow trucks were everywhere. But the centerpiece was the fresh concrete, now hard as rock, with 6 cars permanently fused into it. Gavin was there, having apparently been released or returned from his statement. He was shouting at a demolition crew he must have called in. A massive excavator with a jackhammer attachment was positioning itself near the edge of the pour. Rip it out. Gavin was screaming, his face purple. Get it all out. We need to clear the highway by noon. Destroy everything. He was trying to hide the body. If they hammered the concrete into rubble and hauled it away, no one would ever be able to prove the rebar wasn't there. He could claim it was damaged during the demolition. Hey! I shouted, slamming my truck door. Don't touch that concrete. Gavin spun around. When he saw me, he looked like he was going to explode. You have the nerve to come back here? I am going to sue you for every penny you have. Get him off my site. He gestured to a couple of private security guards he must have hired. They started walking toward me. But then, a black government sedan with flashing blue lights in the grille tore down the access ramp, kicking up dust. It skidded to a halt right between me and the security guards. Elias Cruz stepped out. He was wearing a windbreaker with State Inspector General emblazoned on the back in bold yellow letters. He didn't look like a bureaucrat. He looked like the soldier he used to be. Nobody moves, Elias barked, his voice cutting through the noise. He held up a badge. This site is now under the jurisdiction of the State Ethics and Safety Board. All work stops immediately. Gavin froze. He looked at the badge, then at Elias. Who are you? We have a crisis here. We need to clear the road. The crisis is preserved evidence, Elias said, walking up to Gavin. Mr. Morris, I am issuing a stop work order. Any attempt to demolish, alter, or remove this concrete will be considered tampering with evidence in a felony investigation. Felony? Gavin laughed nervously. This is a traffic accident, caused by him. He pointed at me. We're not here about the traffic, Elias said calmly. He turned to me. Mr. Miller, do you have a sledgehammer? In the truck, I said. Get it. I walked to my truck, grabbed my heavy sledge, and walked back. The news crews had noticed the confrontation. Cameras were swinging around, zooming in on us. Mr. Morris, Elias said, claims that this deck was built to code. The code requires number 6 rebar reinforcement. Mystery 12. Miller, would you please perform a sounding test? I walked over to a clear patch of concrete away from the cars. Gavin looked like he was going to vomit. He knew. I raised the sledgehammer. It was pleasure. I brought it down with a thunderous crack. The concrete, brittle without the steel to hold it together, shattered instantly. A large chunk broke away. I hit it again. And again. I cleared a hole about 2 feet wide. We all looked into the hole. Dirt. Just compacted dirt. No steel, Elias said, loud enough for the news cameras to hear. He pulled out a tape measure and dropped it into the hole. Depth of pour is correct, but there is zero reinforcement. This is unreinforced pavement on a structural span. The silence on the site was absolute. The police officers who had been watching the show suddenly stepped closer to Gavin. That's a mistake, Gavin stammered, sweat pouring down his face. The subcontractor must have forgotten. You signed the pre-pour inspection, Gavin, I said, my voice cold. I saw the clipboard on your desk yesterday. You signed off that the steel was in place. Elias turned to the police officers. Officers, I am declaring this a crime scene. I need you to secure all company records in the site trailer. And I suggest you don't let Mr. Morris leave. The next hour was a blur of activity, but of a different kind. The demolition crew was sent home. Instead, a forensic engineering team arrived. They used ground-penetrating radar to scan the entire section of the highway. The results were damning. The radar showed a complete void of metal for the entire 300-foot section. I sat on the tailgate of my truck, watching the house of cards collapse. Elias was over by the trailer, supervising the seizure of boxes of files. Jack, I looked up. It was Tony. He looked shell-shocked. I didn't know, Sarge, he said, his voice trembling. I just poured where he told me to pour. I swear. I know, Tony, I said gently. You're a good kid. You just follow orders. This isn't on you. The cops are asking everyone questions, Tony said. Gavin is in the back of a squad car. He's crying. He's calling his uncle, Mr. Munner. Phillips? I asked. Yeah. He's screaming that his uncle will fix this. I looked at the horizon. Mr. Phillips is a tough old bird, but he's an honest builder. If he finds out his nephew is building paper bridges. He's here, Tony said, nodding toward the entrance ramp. A sleek silver sedan pulled up. Mr. Henderson Phillips, the owner of the company, stepped out. He was 70 years old, walking with a cane, but he still looked like he could frame a house by himself. He looked at the chaos, the trapped cars, the police, the broken concrete. He saw Gavin in the police car. He didn't go to him. He walked straight to me. I stood up. Mr. Phillips. Jack, he said, his voice gravelly. I turn on the TV to see the weather, and I see my company destroying the interstate. Then I get a call from the state inspector general saying my VP is being booked for fraud. It's true, sir, I said. He skipped the rebar. All of it. Mr. Phillips looked at the hole I had smashed in the concrete. He stared at it for a long time. The look on his face wasn't anger. It was heartbreak. He had built this company from nothing. He had trusted his family to carry it on. I gave him everything, Phillips whispered. I gave him the keys to the kingdom, and he built me a tomb. He turned to me. Why didn't you stop him, Jack? I tried, I said. I refused to pour. He fired me. He kicked me off the site. So I took my signs and left. Phillips looked at me, a sharp glint returning to his eyes. You took the signs? That was you? Yes, sir. It was my equipment. He ordered me to remove it. Phillips looked at the trapped cars, then back at me. A slow, grim smile spread across his face. You stubborn son of a bitch, he said. You let the world see the rot. I couldn't let him hide it, sir. If I had left the signs up, he would have poured over it, covered it up, and opened the road. And 6 months from now, people would have died. Phillips nodded slowly. He understood. It was the life twist. The moment where the destruction I caused was revealed to be the only thing that saved the truth. Elias found the books, I said. Gavin was buying cheap aggregate and pocketing the steel budget. He's been skimming for months. Phillips straightened up. He gripped his cane. Jack, I need you to do something for me. I'm fired, sir. Remember. I'm rehiring you, as of right now. Double your salary. I need someone to run this company who knows that concrete needs steel. I appreciate it, Mr. Phillips, I said, but we have a lot of mess to clean up first. We do, he agreed. But first, I need to go have a word with my nephew. He walked toward the police car. I watched as he leaned into the window. I couldn't hear what was said, but I saw Gavin flinch. It was the end of the line for the golden boy. 3 days later, I found myself in a place I despised almost as much as a mud pit in January, the executive boardroom on the top floor of the Phillips construction headquarters. The room was cold, sterile, and smelled of lemon polish and fear. A long mahogany table stretched down the center, surrounded by men and women in expensive suits, legal counsel, the board of directors, and the crisis management team. I sat at the far end, wearing my funeral and wedding suit, which was a little tight in the shoulders. Next to me was Elias, looking much more comfortable in his Inspector General windbreaker, which he refused to take off. At the head of the table sat Mr. Phillips. He looked 10 years older than he had on the highway. He was staring at a stack of documents that Elias had provided. And then there was Gavin. He wasn't in handcuffs yet. He was out on bail, but he looked like a ghost. He sat opposite me, flanked by a high-priced defense attorney his mother had probably hired. He wasn't the arrogant VP anymore. He was a cornered rat. "We have reviewed the forensic accounting," the head of legal said, adjusting his glasses. "The findings are catastrophic." "Summarize it," Mr. Phillips said, his voice barely a whisper. "Over the last 8 months," the lawyer began. "Mr. Last 8 months," the lawyer began. "Morris created 3 shell companies, Apex Supply, Core Steel Solutions, and Rapid Aggregate. He routed all procurement orders through these entities. He was buying substandard materials," Elias interjected, tossing a lab report onto the table. "The aggregate he used in the I-95 mix wasn't DOT approved. It was landfill crush. It cost $10 a ton. He billed the company $80 a ton and pocketed the difference." "And the steel?" Mr. Phillips asked, not looking up. "Ghost orders," the lawyer said. "He generated invoices for tons of rebar that were never delivered. He forged the receiving signatures. He pocketed nearly $1.2 million in steel budget alone on this project." Gavin slammed his hand on the table. "This is a witch hunt. I was optimizing. I was cutting fat. The engineers overspec everything. That bridge didn't need that much steel." The room went dead silent. I slowly stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. "Mr. Morris," I said, my voice low and steady, "do you know what tensile strength is?" "I have a business degree," Gavin snapped. "I know about margins." "Tensile strength," I continued, ignoring him, "is the ability of a material to withstand a pulling force. Concrete has great compressive strength. It can hold weight, but it has zero tensile strength. When a truck drives over a bridge, the deck flexes. Without steel to hold it, the concrete snaps like a cracker." I leaned over the table. "You didn't optimize. You built a trapdoor. If I hadn't taken those signs, if I hadn't let those cars ruin the poor, that bridge would have opened. And the first time a convoy of semi-trucks hit the expansion joint, 40 people would have fallen onto the freeway below. You didn't just steal money, Gavin. You tried to kill people." I didn't," Gavin stammered, his face pale. "And you tried to pin it on Jack," Mr. Phillips said, finally looking up. His eyes were hard as flint. "You fired the only man who knew what he was doing because you were terrified he'd see the empty forms." "Uncle Henderson, please," Gavin whined, reverting to the spoiled child he was. "It was just a mistake. I can pay it back. We can settle this internally." Mr. Phillips stood up. He walked over to Gavin. For a second, I thought the old man was going to hit him. Instead, he reached out and gently removed the company lapel pin from Gavin's jacket. "This is not a family matter anymore, Gavin," Mr. Phillips said softly. "This is a criminal matter. The company will not be providing your defense. We are fully cooperating with the state. You are terminated, and you are disowned." Gavin looked around the room, seeking an ally. He found only cold stares. The board members, people who had watched him grow up, couldn't even look him in the eye. "Get him out of here!" Phillips said to security. "Before I forget that I'm a civilized man." The fall of Gavin Morris was swift, public, and absolutely brutal. Because I had taken the signs and caused a highly visible, viral traffic disaster, the media interest was intense. The concrete trap became the biggest story in the state. The photo of the white Mercedes fused into the highway was on the front page of every paper. But the story shifted rapidly from disgruntled worker causes chaos to hero foreman exposes deadly corruption. Elias Cruz was a pit bull. He didn't just stop at the I-95 project. He audited every site Gavin had touched since his promotion. They found missing fire suppression systems in an office building. They found cheap wiring in a hospital wing. Gavin hadn't just been greedy. He had been a walking public safety hazard. The trial was 3 months later. I was the star witness. I sat in the stand, answering the district attorney's questions. I walked the jury through the timeline, the late-night pour, the refusal to cut corners, the firing, the order to remove my property. Mr. Miller, the defense attorney, tried to pivot during cross-examination. Isn't it true that by removing the signs, you knowingly created a dangerous condition? I looked at the jury. I followed a direct order from the vice president to remove my personal property. But yes, I knew it would cause chaos, and I thank God every day that it did. You thank God for a pileup? The lawyer asked, incredulous. I thank God that 6 cars got stuck in wet cement at 5 miles per hour, I said, pointing at the evidence table where a chunk of the rebar-free concrete sat. Because if they hadn't, a school bus might have fallen through that deck at 60 miles per hour a month later. Those drivers didn't crash. They were the canary in the coal mine. The jury looked at the concrete sample. They looked at Gavin, who was shrinking into his suit. The defense attorney sat down. He knew he had lost. The verdict came back in under 2 hours. Guilty on all counts: grand larceny, fraud, reckless endangerment, and criminal negligence. The sentencing hearing was the final nail in the coffin. The judge, a stern woman who clearly had no patience for white-collar criminals who endangered blue-collar lives, threw the book at him. Mr. Morris, she said, looking over her glasses, you treated human lives as line items on a spreadsheet. You viewed safety regulations as obstacles to your bonus. You were sentenced to 15 years in state prison, with no possibility of parole for the first 10. As the bailiff clicked the handcuffs onto Gavin's wrists, real steel this time, not the phantom steel he pretended to buy, he looked back at me. There was no arrogance left, just fear. He was led away, the heavy oak doors closing behind him with a sound that felt final. I walked out of the courthouse and onto the steps. The flashbulbs popped. Lisa was there waiting for me. She hugged me tight. It's over, Jack, she whispered. Yeah, I said, taking a deep breath of the cool autumn air. The road is clear. The civil suits from the drivers whose cars were destroyed were settled by Mr. Phillips personally. He bought every single one of them a brand new car top of the line and added a generous check for pain and suffering. He knew that those drivers had unwittingly saved his company's reputation from a much darker fate. Gavin had wanted to make a fortune in concrete. In the end, the weight of it dragged him all the way to the bottom.